Okay, so we've got this really fascinating white paper somebody sent our way,
Hmm.
and we thought it would be awesome to kind of do a deep dive into it with you.
Yeah, definitely.
So the paper is called Product Design Designing Products with the Voiceless Stakeholder in Mind.
Okay.
And it's by Reed Whistler,
Mm-hmm.
Senior Design Engineer at V Technologies.
Interesting.
And it's really all about, well, the core of it is how decisions we make when we design products
Yeah.
have a surprisingly big impact
Okay.
on a stakeholder we don't always think too much about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like thinking about all the different things a product touches, from like the people who make it to the people who buy it,
Hmm.
and then, of course, how it's disposed of.
Right. And that's where it gets really interesting because this paper kind of poses this question like, have you ever thought about the ocean as a stakeholder?
Huh. That's a new one.
It is right.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like customers and suppliers and all that.
Yeah.
But the ocean as like a stakeholder?
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And this paper lays out like a really, really compelling argument for why we need to start doing that.
Okay, I'm hooked already.
Okay, good. So the paper starts off talking about these two like big approaches to how companies think about like their responsibilities,
Right.
shareholder versus stakeholder governance.
Right. Like two different philosophies.
Exactly. So can you kind of break those down for us? Like what's the core difference?
Sure. So, the shareholder model, which has been kind of like the king for a while,
Mm-hmm.
basically says a company's main job is to make as much money as possible for its shareholders,
Mm-hmm.
the people who own stock in the company, right?
Right.
Stakeholder model, though, is like way broader.
Hmm.
It's saying that a company has responsibilities to way more than just shareholders.
Like who?
Oh, man, like everyone and everything it touches, basically. Employees,
Mm-hmm.
customers, suppliers, the communities where they operate, governments even.
So it's not just about like profit.
No, it's like looking at the big picture, right?
Yeah.
Like how do your actions affect all these different groups?
And that's where this paper gets really interesting because they say out of all these stakeholders, the environment often gets the least amount of attention.
Really?
Yeah, especially our oceans.
Especially when it comes to like plastic?
Exactly. It's like this crazy irony, right? The ocean gives us the stuff to make plastic,
Right.
like crude oil and natural gas.
Mm.
But then it becomes the dumping ground for all the waste.
Yeah, that's like a messed up cycle.
Totally. And the paper really digs into this. Like the scale of the problem is just insane.
I bet.
They're saying like 12 to 14 million tons of plastic
Oh.
are going into the oceans every year.
Seriously.
Yeah, and get this. That's like a whole garbage truck full of plastic
Every minute.
every single minute.
That's unbelievable.
I know, it's mind-blowing. And it's not like a new thing
Like I
either.
can say, this has been going on for a while.
Yeah, global plastic production has been like skyrocketing since it became a thing.
Yeah, like back in the, 50s? 60s?
Something like that.
Hmm.
And the U.S. is like a major player in all of this.
Of course.
We've tripled our plastic use since the 80s.
Oh, wow.
So in 2019, the U.S. generated something like 80.5 million tons of plastic waste.
That's got to be like, what, tons per person?
Over 485 pounds
Yeah.
per person per year.
And that's 5 times the global average.
5 times.
Yeah, but we're not doing so hot on that front.
No, not really. And they're projecting that it could go up to like 154 million tons by 2060.
Yikes.
Yeah, so right now, plastics make up about 12% of all the trash in the U.S.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is like containers and packaging.
The stuff that ends up in the ocean.
Exactly. And what's even crazier is like our recycling programs can't keep up.
I mean, recycling is good, but it's not a perfect solution.
No, it's not. And the paper talks about how the U.S. used to just ship tons of plastic waste to other countries.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right, but now places like China are cracking down on that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so now our recycling system is even more overloaded.
Which means more plastic ends up where?
You guessed it.
The ocean?
The ocean, and the problem is plastic doesn't just disappear.
Yeah, it takes forever to break down.
It's hundreds, even thousands of years.
It's crazy.
I know, and it breaks down into these tiny little pieces called microplastics.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
They're everywhere.
Of
Like
our-
literally everywhere in the ocean.
So we can't really clean them up then.
Not really.
That's a bummer.
It is, and then you've got the bigger pieces of plastic that get
Mhm.
caught up in these big swirling currents called gyres.
Oh, right, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Exactly. It's like this giant island of trash.
That's awful.
It is, and the paper talks about how all this plastic is like devastating for marine life.
I can only imagine.
Animals eat it thinking it's food.
Oh, no.
They get tangled up in it.
It's just sad.
It is. It's like a huge threat to entire ecosystems.
Yeah, I mean, the ocean is a delicate balance.
Right, like coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass beds.
All getting messed up by plastic.
Exactly. And the paper even brings up the whole issue of seafood contamination.
Oh, yeah, like we eat the fish that eat the plastic.
Right. So it's not just a problem for the ocean.
Yeah.
It affects us too.
It all comes back to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the paper lays out this whole argument
Yeah.
for how we can actually start to fix this.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So it all starts with the company's governance model.
Like shareholder versus stakeholder,
Exactly. They're saying we need to shift to a stakeholder model,
which means
considering all the stakeholders.
including the environment.
Exactly. So before a company even starts designing a new product,
Okay.
they should do this thing called a stakeholder impact analysis.
And that basically means
It's like looking at all the potential negative impacts their product could have.
on everyone and everything.
Right. And then using that information to make better design choices.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things they focus on is the raw materials.
Oh, yeah, like what the product is made of.
Exactly. So they point out that a lot of single-use plastic items,
Okay.
like Ziploc bags,
Mm-hmm.
the liners in cereal boxes,
Right.
candy wrappers,
Yeah.
all that stuff, it's made from plastics that can't be recycled.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason they use those plastics...
Just cheaper.
Exactly. Cheaper for the company, more convenient for the customer.
But bad for the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the paper is like, okay, we need to start using different materials.
Like what?
Stuff that's biodegradable, renewable, recyclable,
Okay.
like bamboo,
Oh, interesting.
glass, metal, beeswax coated paper.
Huh. Never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's cool. And plant-based materials for food packaging.
That's a good idea.
Right. And they know some companies might be like, whoa, this is going to be expensive.
Yeah. I mean, new materials always cost more.
Right. But the paper argues that in the long run, it's actually cheaper.
How so?
Because when you think about all the damage plastic does to the environment,
Mm-hmm.
the cleanup costs the health problems it causes.
Right.
It ends up costing way more.
So it's like an investment up front to save money later
Exactly. And they even suggest the government could give tax breaks to companies
that use recyclable and biodegradable materials.
to help them make the switch.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Right. And they do talk about recycling and new laws to reduce plastic use, but their main point is we need to stop the problem before it starts.
By designing better products in the first place.
Exactly. So what about us? Like, what can we do as consumers?
Yeah, that's the big question.
The paper acknowledges that we tend to buy what's cheap and convenient.
Which is usually the plastic stuff.
Right. But they're saying if companies start doing the right thing
Mm-hmm.
and the government supports them,
Okay.
then we'll have better options to choose from.
So it's kind of like a system-wide change.
Exactly. It's not just on us as individuals.
Makes sense.
Right. So the big takeaway from this paper is that we need to start thinking about the environment,
Mm-hmm.
and especially the ocean as a stakeholder in everything we do.
Like a silent partner.
Right. It's not just about profits anymore.
It's about the planet, too.
Exactly. And it makes you think about all the products we use every day. Like, what went into making them?
What impact they have.
Exactly. So here's something to think about. Given how interconnected everything is,
Right.
and how long the effects of our choices last,
Yeah.
what can we do to encourage more companies
Okay.
to adopt this stakeholder model
Mm-hmm.
and start designing more sustainable products?
That's a tough one.
It is, but it's worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
And just so you know, this whole paper was written by Reed Whistler.
Okay.
He's a senior design engineer at V Technologies, so he knows his stuff.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it's a really insightful paper.
Definitely.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
So we encourage you to, like, read the whole thing
Yeah.
and keep learning about this stuff.
It's important.
It really is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.